When I was a little kid going to the cinema in London, there were all these films I could see for kids that starred kids. I could see a child of my own age involved in some sort of massive adventure, whether it was The Black Stallion or E.T. or Explorers or Stand By Me or any one of those wonderful 80s kids movies. And I kind of noticed that sort of movie was dying. Kids movies now are either frenetic animation, usually based on a brand, or big superhero movies. And I think it's important for young cinema fans to recognize themselves in movies and also recognize their world in movies, especially if it's a world where fantasy intrudes. Time Bandits would be another one I would reference. So that's what we were trying to do with The Kid Who Would Be King. But it's not a throwback movie. It's not a retro movie. It's not set in the 80s. It's not trying to look like one of those 80s movies. It's very much a contemporary movie set in the here and now with modern kids. It's not sort of filtered through rose-coloured goggles for their parents. Do you know what I mean? Doesn't have Tears for Fears on the soundtrack or Olivia Newton-John on the telly. It's a contemporary movie for contemporary kids.
What I loved about Attack the Block, I interviewed you way back when for that, is you said that while it's a film that has influences on its sleeve, Walter Hill, John Carpenter, etc., you said that actually one influence maybe people haven't spotted was Le Con Lucien, the Louis Malle film. I wonder with The Kid Who Would Be King, a film where you do have so many films like Explorers, Excalibur, etc., is there a film that's influenced it that may be unlikely?
Well, now I'm going to have to beat La Comme Lucien as a sort of sophisticated... I mean, in Attack the Block, you know, La Comme Lucien was the idea of a bad kid and how easily influenced you are as a teenager and into negative behaviour, how all the sort of energies of adolescence can be corrupted as they are with that character in that movie. I mean... John Borman's Excalibur is a pretty adult film that is not really for kids. And I saw it when I was 12 because it was in that little period when there was no certification on VHSs and it was one of the first Warner Brothers releases in a big padded puffy sleeve that you could get from your local video shop. And it's pretty erotic and violent and gory. I remember seeing a big spread in the Sunday Times about it on the kitchen table in my mum and dad's house, my house, as a child. And it was a massive double-page spread from one of those battle scenes at the end, almost like a Japanese theatre stage with just a massive pile of bodies, a battlefield that was made purely of nothing but bodies. You couldn't see the ground. And different swords and staves and weapons pointing up like a kind of macabre graveyard. And then that amazing moment when Mordred and Arthur are impaled on each other's swords. And seeing that as a child made me think, holy crap, I have to see that film. And then I saw it on VHS, and there's something fantastic about seeing films you're not allowed to see as a kid. Again, that's something you lose when you merge all audiences, which has happened now. If every film has to be for everybody, you sort of slightly lose that sense of the forbidden. You lose that sense of, okay, this movie's for me and I love it because it's for me. Oh, that movie's not for me. What's it like not to be me? But Excalibur was like that for me. And in fact, this film came from that viewing of Excalibur combined with seeing E.T., the idea of a wish fulfillment fantasy and the notion that you could use the sword and the stone as a wish fulfillment fantasy in contemporary Britain.
One film that is coming up on Film4 that I wonder it was on your radar as a kid in the mid-80s. It shares a similar young, adventurous approach to a British cultural icon. It's Young Sherlock Holmes.
Yes.
Was that on your radar in the mid-80s?
So Young Sherlock Holmes was very much on my radar because they came to my school to audition kids for it, and I got very excited. I was a big Spielberg fan, big Robert Zemeckis fan, Christopher Columbus fan, and so I thought, okay, I've got to go for this. And I thought, well, I've got a long nose and I'm imperious. Maybe I could be a shoo-in for the character of Sherlock Holmes. So I did the audition, and then they just didn't get back to the school for a long time. And so I was completely obsessed with, like, have I got it? Haven't I got it? Of course I hadn't got it. But I lied to a lot of people that I had got it. So I remember going to my local hairdressers and going, oh, yeah, I'm probably going to be playing Sherlock Holmes in the new Young Sherlock Holmes film. And then when I found out I hadn't got it, I was deeply ashamed, and I never visited that hairdresser's ever again. And I was very jealous of the finished film, and I've always had a sort of slightly ambivalent relationship to it to this day, because it should have been me, even though I was actually too young to play it, and I couldn't act, and I wouldn't have known what I was doing.
Well, that's your sliding doors moment right there. What could have happened?
Yes.
You could have been Nicholas Rowe.
I could have been Nicholas Rowe. I could have destroyed Christopher Columbus's career and brought down the edifice of Amblin with a dreadful performance.
Could have saved us from all sorts or whatever. I'd like to ask about Attack the Block. When you look back on that film now, of course, there are so many anchor points. Looking back on it from today, there's a doctor in it. There's John Boyega, who's gone to a great deal of things as well. But for you, when you look back on that film, what is it that comes to mind? Achievements, etc.
When you actually make a film, you can never really experience it in the way that an audience experiences it, because every single frame is full of so much just experiential information for you. You remember what the weather was like, you remember what mood you were in, you remember what mood the actors were in, you know what was behind the camera, you know what you aimed to get, the compromises you made. Some things are better than you wanted, some things aren't quite as good. It's a big swarm of bees of feelings, and for every single shot. So a lot of things come to mind, but mainly pride for John especially, and how his career took off after that movie, thanks to a lot of work by him. Amazing pride for Jodie, for she was pretty well known before Attack the Block.
She'd been in Venus before then, I suppose.
Yeah, so she'd sort of arrived on the scene with a bang, but obviously to be a character as iconic as the Doctor, and especially in this moment culturally in terms of the sex of the character, is really impressive. And really just really fond memories. It was such a good experience, and I had no idea how people would react to that film. It was a complete sort of out of the blue thing. I was a late night puppet-based comedian and radio DJ. I had no idea how people would respond to that story told like that. So it was very gratifying that people seemed to dig it.
The Kid Who Would Be King, it skews younger in terms of the audience, of course. So it's fantasy versus sci-fi monster movie. But what it does share is this vision of contemporary London. And as a viewer, as a London resident myself, I love that. Well, I don't love that in the years since the Haygate estate and the Aylesbury estate have been demolished, but in this movie you almost nod to that, with the Sword and the Stone appearing on the construction site for a site of swanky flats. How much do you see this being almost a shared world, a shared universe of Joe Cornish's point of view on Britain?
Well, there's one shared universe element in this movie, is the two policemen that Merlin and Chance are the same two actors. Who actually are called Adam and Joe, who were the policemen who were killed in the police van at the beginning of Attack the Block. So I like to have, hopefully in all my films, them as policemen being in some way used and abused by some sort of fantastical force. But I guess it's the London I experience, really. The London around me is, the world of Attack the Block, which is, middle-class houses and housing estates right side by side. The world around me is chicken shops and new build flats and, suburban streets. So it's basically, both ideas are ideas I had just, sort of from my life, really. I like walking around the neighborhoods that I grew up in and live in, and thinking, wouldn't it be amazing if this happened or that happened? So they're not sort of Richard Curtis-y views of London. They're hopefully quite, realistic views.
So I'd like to ask about Tintin, as you said. So that's a film where you're one half of the screenplay credit.
Yeah.
With Edgar. What did you bring to that screenplay when you look back? What are the Joe Cornish bits?
There's a bunch of my lines in there. I couldn't. The only one that I can be specific about is the very last lines of the movie. How's your thirst for adventure, Captain? Unquenchable. Are lines I wrote, and I remember vividly handing those pages to Mr. Spielberg for him to read in the office at Amblin. Me sitting beneath the sledge from Citizen Kane in a glass case above me, and Stephen sitting like a very kind and benevolent teacher at school reading my maths homework and liking those lines. Some of the stuff I wrote he didn't like, but those he liked. But it was a big collaboration, that movie. You know, it's Stephen Moffat wrote the first draft. Then Edgar and I came in and rewrote it. And then Edgar left and I did a bit of writing on my own. Then Peter and Stephen, obviously on the set, are putting a massive amount of input and changing and shaping it as well. So I'm a small cog in a big machine, but there are still little bits and bobs that I wrote, which makes me very proud.
Yeah, this is a bit of a stab in the dark, but watching The Kid Who Would Be King, this idea of a very real social context where the world of fantasy could just be around the corner. I'm quite a Japanophile, a fan of anime, and Adam and Joe Go Tokyo was, for certain people of a certain age, quite a way into that world of Japan. Are you a fan of anime, Miyazaki, Studio Ghibli, where if you think about Totoro, etc., they have real family dynamics and real social worlds where trolls, etc., can be living side by side? Are they films that you watch, enjoy?
Yeah, I'm not a massive expert on anime. I don't go that deep. But of course, like anybody else, I love Studio Ghibli. I love Koreeda at the moment. I'm sort of addicted to him. I thought Shoplifters was incredible. I loved Takashi Miike. And he has made an incredible film called The Great Yokai War. And that's based on this Japanese notion that every physical object or natural object has a spirit, a soul. And it's this boy who goes through a fantasy adventure where all the spirits around him back him up, become his gang. And there's an amazing moment where he's looking for support and the brick wall behind him suddenly develops a face and goes, "I'll help you," which shows that in Japanese culture everything has a personality. And that's such an incredible worldview, and it's exactly what you're saying. It's meshing a sort of spirit of animation where anything can be anthropomorphized with a sense of reality. The idea that a wall can talk, a camera can talk, the floor could talk, everything has a self, is central to the worldview there, and also is an incredible motor for that kind of imaginative storytelling. And Japanese culture is so exciting because for us it feels so foreign, but yet it's so rich and there's so much stuff to get into. And it's like, if you ever feel that you've sort of seen all the good stuff in the West, it's like opening this amazing door to another incredibly rich world of entertainment and escapism.
And you mentioned Koreeda. It reminded me of I Wish, where the kids go on the road trip to find whether the wish at the crossing between the two bullet trains could come true. Have you not seen that? It's a fantastic
No,
film.
I have, yeah. I think he's probably the best director of children in the world. You know, the performances he gets out of young people are just incredible. And I think he uses the same method that Alfonso Cuarón did on Roma, not telling them much about the script and just describing the scene on the day and then letting them improvise. But Nobody Knows is an extraordinary movie, like Father Like Son. His family dramas are second to none, I think.
Very last quick question. You talk about animation, design, all these flourishes. I love the opening sequence of this film. Could you please tell us about that, the way it goes from these beautiful illustrations to animation? I know you're a doodler, but was that something very early on, that it's the visual world of the illustrations you'd see in myths and legends books that you wanted to bring to this film?
So I had a book, I think it was my mum's book when I was growing up, of Arthurian legends, a very beautiful book. I think it was published in the 50s. The sort of book that if you turned the page, the spine would crack and the whole thing would fall apart. So you had to be very gentle with it. And that was the idea for The Kid Who Would Be King, where the lead kid has a book that he treasures of Arthurian legends, and they lead him to see the hero's journey and his own quest in one certain way, but then the story pushes it in another way. And that book comes to life at the beginning of the movie. So you start the movie inside this picture book as if you're in the boy's imagination as he reads it. And so we have a minute and a half of animation done by a Spanish company called Glassworks, who did a lot of the animation for Monster Calls. They're a very brilliant company, and they did very beautiful work. And it's a good way to kind of provide a primer for the audience, so kids know what they need to know about the Arthurian legend to understand the next bit of the story. And also it starts the movie like a storybook with Patrick Stewart's voiceover, and it's a lovely sort of accommodating, warm, thrilling opening.